Okay, Judge.
Do you think you could locate him and...
That's...
Ravelli.
Mr. Ravelli, thank you. I asked for you to come back. I'd like you to do a little exercise for us, if you will. Not now, but when you've got time to think and get dates and get it precise. If you could do a little written exercise for us. What I'm interested in is these when these units were disbanded, when people were dispersed, etc. In other words, when did the capacity for investigation of criminal activity, how did that disappear? Could you do that for us? And
yes.
So if you could just identify the units, how and when they were disbanded or dispersed, and which units did what as well. Thank you very. I'd appreciate that.
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Just one.
No, not that. Sorry, Mr. Reid. I don't have to trouble you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Judge,
you, Mr. CEO.
Yes, Judge, the next witness is Ms. Makungu Mthebule.
Good morning.
Morning, Judge.
Thank you very much for coming to assist us. We appreciate it. You affirm that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If so, will you say, I do?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to you, ma'am. As you may be aware, this part of the hearing is concerned with reasons why senior experienced SARS employees left the employ of SARS between 1 April 2014 and 31 March 2018. But before we get there, may you please give me your qualifications?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. I'm a legally qualified attorney. I was admitted as an attorney in February 1999. I have a BProc LLB degrees from University of Fort Hare, and I've got an LLM from University of Pretoria.
And when did you join SARS, and in what capacity?
I joined SARS in January, the 3rd of January 2008. When I was recruited, because I was approached by an agency, recruitment agency, looking for a person to fill the position. The position was pitched at a level that was called Assistant General Manager. But when I started, after I've accepted the offer, the title was changed to Senior Manager because Mr. Magashula, then as the HR head, was busy with the renaming conventions and all that. So I was Senior Manager, having senior managers reporting to me. That's how I was recruited. Thank you, sir.
And where were you working before you joined SARS?
Okay. My career started at a law firm called Mutlaben Mushano Attorneys in Pretoria and Zanin. That's why I served my articles. From there, I worked at the former Atomic Energy Corporation of South Africa, which is now called NEXA. I think I worked there for five years, 8 months. And when I left, I was already senior legal advisor. I was there after recruited by an organization called EDI Holdings, which was reporting to the Department of Minerals and Energy at that time. So I've been largely in the minerals and the energy sector for most of my career. And I worked there for 3 years, 8 months, until I was recruited by SARS.
And why did you join SARS?
It's an interesting story, to be honest. I used to read a lot, read the newspapers a lot. And somewhere, I think, end of 2006 or beginning of 2007, I came across an article that dealt with the changes that had taken place at SARS over the past few years since SARS was converted into a public entity from a government department. And the work that Mr. Gordhan had done together with his team. And there was a focus on Mr. Gosilo, who was the chief legal officer at that time. And because he was the chief legal officer, when I read about him, because he sounded like a solid person, and they said something like, if you want to know anything about tax, you go to Gosilo. So for me, the way SARS was described together with its top executives was inspirational. And I felt my career was still growing. I was still young. And I wanted to join an organization that had a very reputable, name. Hence, when I was approached, I was so excited, and I was really praying and hoping I would get the job.
And what was it like working at SARS when you first arrived?
To summarize, I would say I had lots of fun. It has always been a place. I mean, I'm not talking about the recent years. When we joined, that cohesion that existed amongst colleagues, having leadership of a certain quality, people you felt you could look up to and learn from. I was a happy employee. Moreover, at that stage, Minister Gordhan was talking about that term he liked, higher purpose. We knew we could earn better salaries outside. It's a fact. But you worked for SARS because you felt you're contributing something to your country. You're not there to work for yourself or for your family only. So I felt I'm a proud employee. I had support from colleagues, from bosses. I wasn't scared of approaching anybody. That's the kind of environment we had. I even took out some of my own personal time to spend here at work and push work, because the division that I joined was still, a little bit shaken. There was more work to be put in. So I didn't even mind putting extra hours for no extra pay.
And did you find that, generally speaking, employees of SARS bought into the higher purpose philosophy?
Very much so, sir, if I may say.
And during your time at SARS, did you receive promotions? And if so, could you please briefly describe the responsibilities that those promotions entailed?
Okay. Let me put it this way. When I joined, as I explained, I was senior manager. And I had to, when they recruited me, they said there's management, sort of challenges, and they need somebody who could sort of build the unit and take it to a certain level. So looking at my experience and what I'd done in my previous employment, I think that's why I was employed. So I built, not alone, of course, with the assistance of my managers and some of the colleagues. Corporate legal went from being this small division that was looking at mainly contracts, small-scale legal advice, to being something that can't be done without, if I may put it that way, because the role has grown so much at the moment that it's highly unlikely to see the commissioner or somebody in a high-level meeting that's got certain legal, reputational risks, so to say, without a senior legal person by their side. So this is the role that I've occupied, and how I've grown through the ranks is it resonates with how the division itself has grown, because I got... when I joined in 2008, I explained I was AGM senior manager. October 2008, there was a process called Goodness of Fit, if I'm not mistaken. This Goodness of Fit process, looked at people's skills and, their, on the managerial side, their capabilities, what is it that could be improved. And I was promoted to executive, corporate legal services. And the years went by, things were even getting better. My role grew because I was even sitting in high-level committees that were dealing with very important stuff in the organization. As you know, corporate legal is a division that, it's like a law firm of SARS, if I were to put it. It's not more focused on the tech side of things. It's more focused on the corporate legal, non-tax legal aspects. So in 2012, I think April, if I'm not mistaken, I was promoted to Group Executive Corporate Legal Services. And that was one of the highlights of my career. I worked as a group executive until December 2014, when I was called in by not the commissioner, it was Mr. Kosilo, who was the acting commissioner then. The commissioner was out of the country. And Mrs. Elizabeth Kumalo, the head of HR. And that day I was scared because, I'm sorry to say this, Mr. Pillay had just been suspended on 5 December. I was called on 8 December. And as I was driving, I was asking myself, am I going to be suspended or something like that? And then I get there, I was told that the commissioner is asking me to step into Mr. Pillay's shoes whilst he's on suspension. And I was awed. I was out of words. But I have to mention that I asked the key question. Out of all the 15,000 or so employees, why me? Because I was happy, but the moment was a little bit too overwhelming for me, if you may understand. And the response I got from Mr. Lowe and Mrs. Kumalo is that, Makungu, you've done well throughout. Look at how you've grown, how you've helped build the organization, build the division. Now you've built a legal division that's so stable. And Mr. Lowe even said, the burden is off my shoulders. So Mrs. Kumalo even explained that, with your legal background, your strategic way of looking at things, you would fit perfectly in EXCO. And the commissioner has watched you for a while, he's engaged with you, he's happy, he wants you to take that position. And I acted in Mr. Pillay's position for 11 full months, from around 8 December 2014 to 9 November 2015.
And what was Mr. Pillay's position that you were appointed into?
Let me clarify. Mr. Pillay was the chief officer of what was called SEC at that time, Strategy, Enablement and Communications. Enablement means business enablement, those processes and whatever. And whilst he was a deputy commissioner at that stage, he had a line function. He was responsible for the overall strategy of the organization. He was responsible for all those reporting requirements to Parliament, to the minister, compliance models. He was responsible for anti-corruption and security. That's what I inherited. It was anti-corruption and security, strategy and risk, business enablement division, stakeholder management, which encompasses your integrity, ethics, and those kinds of things. One other important division was the VIP unit, what's now called the Restricted Taxpayer Unit, which deals with taxes of very important people. That's why it's called a Restricted Taxpayer Unit. Deals with taxes of the presidents, former presidents, judges, all those high-profile politicians, high-profile people, heads of the army, all those political parties. I think municipalities were trying to get them on board,
Yes.
even councillors, all those people. So it's a highly sensitive unit. The last unit was what was called, so I'm sorry, it's not the last, Web Usability Unit, which looked after the SARS website and suggested, changes. How do we display our information so that external people would be able to have a view as to what SARS does. If you want to Google something on SARS, you can get that information easily. Another important division was the communications division. So it was a fairly big division from where I was. Communications, if you see these adverts that tell you about the tax season and thank you for having participated in taxes, it excluded the media part though. The part that people like Adrian Lekay dealt with, the spokespeople, and they reported differently. But basically all the internal and external communications, all the communication strategies with employees, which was very important. Our communication strategies with our biggest stakeholders and our general people in South Africa to know what's happening at SARS and what is it that they should look out for and prepare themselves if it's about to be tax season.
Yes.
All the adverts and stuff related to that. That's what I was looking after, sir.
And did you interact with any of the previous commissioners in that role?
Previous commissioners? No, not at that stage.
Not at that stage.
Yeah, because I was trying to think if Minister Gordhan he wasn't our minister at that stage. When I acted, Mr. Nene was the Minister of Finance, and I interacted with Mr. Nene.
Sorry, if I said ministers, I meant
Oh,
commissioners.
sorry, commissioners, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
No, previous commissioners were Mr. Gordhan. Okay, he was the longest serving commissioner. The only other commissioner was, what's his name, Mr. Van Heerden, who was in the legal division, but I had very limited interaction with him. Mr. Pillay, not at that stage.
Yes.
Mr. Magashula, not at that stage, if that's what you want to know.
Yes, all right.
Okay.
And in September of 2014,
Yes.
a new commissioner is appointed, Mr. Moyane. Did you have any interaction with him?
When he was appointed,
In your role, yes. Did you have
Yes.
any interactions with Mr.
very much so.
Yes.
I reported to the commissioner directly when I was acting as the chief officer of strategy enablement and communications.
Yes, and what were your interactions like?
To be honest, in the beginning, I was happy when he was recruited. I don't want to lie.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought maybe somebody fresh from outside with different views. Transformation, not that there wasn't transformation completely, but we could still do better. I was very happy when Mr. Moyane was appointed. And I must say I had a fairly good relationship with him. And if I may add, during the period when I was acting in that role as a chief officer, I sat in EXCO.
Yes.
Of course, in EXCO, I'm very vocal by nature, and some people can't take it, if I may put it that way. So I raise issues, I raise difficult questions. I try and see if something can be raised separately or something concerns all of us, and I raise it within a certain forum. So I raised a number of things, some of which made Mr. Moyane unhappy.
And what were the things that you raised?
I know others have testified to this because I did listen to the recordings and all that. The biggest issue I raised was the culture of fear in EXCO. And fear and dictatorship that's ongoing in the organization. And I even said to Mr. Moyane when he said to me, but don't listen to corridor talk. I said it's not corridor talk. Maybe it's my female status, it's my matronly figure, it's my personality, because I engage easily with other people. So people would approach me, they would find me more approachable. You know, EXCO members are feared, even if they haven't done anything wrong. But maybe because I started with people there and I rose through the ranks, I was already, you know, I'd already established relationships with people. So they came to me a lot. Moreover, I didn't move to Block A where the chief officers sit. And I wasn't allocated an office next door, unlike other chiefs. So I sat in my old office, and I think that was a good thing because people could, you know, come and raise things that I could raise with the leadership of the organization. When I raised the issue of dictatorship, my boss was not happy.
What did you say?
Okay, let me give you a little bit of context. If I remember carefully, Mr. Moyane was talking about something to the effect that our people need to feel safe, well looked after, this fear thing, you know, because there was an impression that there was a culture of fear previously.
Yes.
Okay, there was, but to a very small scale, in my view. Very small scale. And I won't say insignificant, but I'm saying to a small scale. Yes. So I raised my hand and I said, Commissioner, we need to look at ourselves here in the room. People are not saying what you're saying. They are so scared of us. People approach me all the time. They said they're even scared of, you know, talking on the phones and whatever because they feel they're being watched. And they feel somebody always tells them what to do and not necessarily their bosses. And if I were to expatiate on that without sounding controversial or bitter, there was a fear around Mr. Makwakwa because he occupied a very, very strong position in the organization. I can say this with authority because I sat at EXCO and I watched him and I interacted with him and I clashed with him. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this one.
Yes.
Yes. So the commissioner stormed out of the meeting that day for a good 25 to 30 minutes. He was livid. Subsequent to that, we had a conversation. And he
Did
said,
he ever respond? Did he ever respond? You say he stormed out for 25 minutes. Was there ever a response to the issue that you had raised?
No. Separately, yes, between me and him. And I'm not sure if I should go into the conversation. Safe to say that he said he wasn't happy about me having raised that and he didn't sleep well that night. And he wanted to send me an SMS. And I said, you could have sent me an SMS anytime. I would have responded. He called me the next day. We had a one-on-one. And I explained exactly what I meant. If you may allow me, Judge, I'm trying to be truthful. We have various EXCO members. I think it was about 8 or so. I can't remember that time if it was 8,
Yes.
more or less. Each and every one of my colleagues was complaining about interference in their divisions.
Yes.
And they were complaining about one person. And people are not always feeling free to, you know, voice their concerns, especially if it's sensitive matters. But I was brave enough, but I suffered the consequences. And I raised that all of us, you know, we feel Mr. Makwakwa interferes a lot in our divisions, but I focused more on me and what was happening. Employees would be shifted from my division without me knowing. If you hear what I'm saying.
Yes.
How does Jonas and the commissioner discuss moving an employee from my section to Jonas' section without me knowing? Am I put there as a, what is it? Something like that. Yeah. You know, just to save face and say we have a black lady in leadership. That's not who I am. I'm highly qualified. I still have a lot to learn, but I know my story. So I wasn't happy about that.
And were there other incidents of interference in your division?
Yes, a lot of them, especially with the VIP unit.
Yes.
It's a very sensitive unit. I remember my
If
first...
I may, before you go into that
Sure.
particular incident, if it does entail the names of taxpayers, please leave the names out, but continue to mention the stories,
Okay.
whatever information that you may have, but please don't mention the names of particular taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, I won't. I promise. There was a lot of interference, and I raised it with the commissioner, because there would be somebody who would constantly harass my people for information about this taxpayer and that taxpayer. And my people were constantly,
Who would harass you? Who would harass?
they felt harassed. Maybe they were not being harassed.
By who?
Mr. Makwakwa. Jonas always wanted information about something or someone or some taxpayer or whatever without going into detail. So they would phone me and ask, should we give it to him? And I said, no, don't give him anything. Let me raise this with him or the commissioner.
Is there anything wrong with that?
Yes,
What?
he had nothing to do with the VIP unit. He wasn't responsible for it then. Subsequently, after the new operating model, it falls under business and individual taxes paid that Mr. Makwakwa was looking after. So then it had nothing to do with him. And just to put a little bit more context, when I discussed with the commissioner, I said to him, the way Mr. Pillay and Mr. Gordon did this, you know, they were trying to put this division at arm's length so that they don't interfere or be seen to be interfering. Because you understand, it's very easy to say Mr. Pillay is looking after the interests of Advocate Mabongi Masilo. It's very easy for people to say that. I mean, there are warm bodies, people who are working there, and they see what's happening. So I raised that with the commissioner. I even asked him for a meeting with Mr. Makwakwa and him. And he said he's going to organize it. He organized the meeting. When I got there, Mr. Makwakwa wasn't there. And the commissioner said to me, he feels, no, we shouldn't, call Mr. Makwakwa. It might just create a little bit of he didn't want conflict the way I understood it.
So he wanted there to be a meeting
Yes, openly.
about Mr. Makwakwa's conduct in his absence.
No, not in his absence, in his presence. I wanted him to be there.
Yes.
When I spoke about the risks that exist with regard to this division and how we should best all approach it. That's what I wanted to raise.
Yes, what I'm saying is that the commissioner
Yes.
did not want Mr. Makwakwa
Yes,
present.
at that stage,
At that
yes.
stage, right.
So, he said we discussed a memo that I'd written for him, outlining the risks of relating to the governance of the VIP unit. And I detailed some mitigation strategies and to say this is how maybe things should be done. And I remember specifically asking about how specific high-profile people should be treated, because there were lots of issues with everybody has tax issues at one stage or another. So do we just write them letters? Do we allocate a person to this person because they are very busy? Judge is busy now. Maybe we should have somebody who assists him with taxes from the SARS side, and he will assign somebody. So it's not a question of people who are unreachable and whatever. And the biggest issue was when people had this IT-88, which is when the SARS takes money from your account. Everybody would phone the commissioner or whoever and say, they took money out of my account. So always I had to explain, no, we went through these stages. We wrote them emails. We communicated with their PA. Even before the money was taken out, this is what happened.
Sorry, can I just ask,
Sure.
are they on?
It's on.
It's on. When you, sorry, Mr. Mthebule, when you came into your position,
Yes.
were there procedures and codes and that for dealing with high-profile taxpayers? So you found them there already?
I found them there. And
You
they were good. They were good procedures.
So all you were doing was ensuring
Just
that they
ensuring.
were implemented. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Katz.
Yes, please continue. The meeting, yes.
Can't remember where I was. Please remind me.
There was a memo that outlined
Okay.
risk and so on, and you were putting all of this information
Yes,
to the commissioner.
To the commissioner.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I did that, eventually I wanted him to say, I don't agree with this, I agree with this. But he was happy with what I presented. He didn't seem unhappy. He just didn't give me the direction then as to how to deal with specific issues that I'd raised with him, that I rather not mention in detail here, because it's highly sensitive. So I think eventually that also created some tension, because I had an employee who was extremely good in what she was doing, but she was so mechanical. She would just do what the law says. She doesn't care whether it's Donald Trump or whoever. She would do whatever is required to be done. So it also created a little bit of tension. And another form of interference, I would constantly be pushed not by the commissioner. How far is this case? What's happening with this interest and penalties and whatever, of whoever? And it's not right.
Who would ask this?
Usually it would be Mr. Makwakwa.
Yes, all right.
He would phone me or SMS me. I'm in Cape Town. I'm with certain people. They want to know. And I found that...
Certain people being?
Certain people.
Just, you mean taxpayers?
High-level taxpayers.
All right.
Let's say very important people.
Yes, yes.
In my view, that was wrong. We shouldn't, much as we have people that we know, but try and point people in the right direction. If they have queries, there's nothing wrong with it. I get that myself every day. The commissioner used to get it all the time. Most of the time he would say, Mark, deal with this, whoever deals with this, but not to be instructed by a person who's got nothing to do with my division, and doing it with a certain level of force.
I just want to understand the nature of the communication. What was it? So there'd be an SMS saying what?
It would be an SMS. I'm with important people here in Cape Town. They want to know what's happening with this case, a taxpayer that I can't mention. Because this taxpayer owes capital, interest and penalties. I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
How far are you with trying to write off their interest and penalties? You can't write off interest and penalties before you even get to the capital amount. I'm not a tax person, but that's my understanding. And why him? The commissioner never for once called me and said, Makungu, do this and that. No, I have to be fair there. He's never done that. It has always been Mr. Makwakwa. And it caused some tension for a while. And I think...
What were your responses, if
I
ever?
refused. I said, no, we can't do that. Sometimes I would say, a matter is still going through the normal course of business, through the processes. There are processes that are outlined. And he knew them by heart. He'd been an employee here longer than I am, 10 years or so before I came. He knew. I think it was more, maybe I shouldn't even say I'm sorry to say that. When you're in a powerful position, sometimes we forget, we just get so powerful that we think we can, do or manipulate anything. I think we couldn't at some stage draw that line that power comes with responsibility. Eh? You have to do the right thing once you exercise your power. And that power, in my view, has to be exercised in a very positive manner, not in a way of instilling fear in people and making people do what you want them to do. Otherwise, they feel they're going to get punished.
To be fair, why do you interpret that as an attempt to influence or to interfere? A person who's a SARS employee, EXCO member, says I'm at a particular place with so-and-so, and it sounds like a query. Why do you think it's an attempt to interfere?
It's not a normal query. You can't be telling me about interest and penalties and stuff. There's nothing wrong in saying, you know, there's this person, I'm going to refer them to you if you can assist, just to let them know what's happening in their matter. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't tell me what to do in a division that at that stage I'm responsible for. Unfortunately, he had nothing to do with that division.
Sorry, just to follow, if I may, just to follow the question that the advocate's putting to you. What you're saying, he didn't ask you what the status of the matter was, he told you what to do.
Definitely.
Right off capital, right off interest,
Yes.
Exercise the Commissioner's discretion in the following way. That's
Yes.
what we're
yes.
hearing. Okay.
That has happened,
Thank you.
especially with one particular taxpayer that I'm not going to mention.
Yes. All right. Please continue. You were going into...
Just a
All
follow-up. And these requests, were they ever in writing or were they just calls to you?
Mostly were calls and some were SMS messages. Unfortunately, they've all disappeared from my phone. But there were lots of SMS exchanges between me and Mr. Makwakwa, lots of them.
Yes.
I remember one specific SMS. I was so irritated. I even asked, "What do you mean?" I hope he remembers wherever he is. What do you mean? Because it frustrated me so much that this is my peer at that stage. We were all acting. He was acting chief operations officer. I was acting chief officer of SEC. So we were virtually on the same level. Safe to say he had a much bigger division and much more influence, and he was closer to the commissioner than I was. So I couldn't understand. I felt the lines were blurred. And to add to that, there was a time I approached the commissioner and asked him, Commissioner, I want to understand, did you assign certain responsibilities to Mr. Makwakwa insofar as your office is concerned? And he said, why are you asking? I said, I can't bear to get a call from him on a Sunday afternoon telling me to get ready for Parliament on Tuesday. I'd rather get that call from Sister, who's the Commissioner's executive assistant. Why do I get it from my own peer? Does he run the Commissioner's office? And I wanted to understand that specific part because he was always ahead of everybody else with information, with what's going to happen. And I take it's because of the nature of the relationship that he had with the Commissioner, which is fine. But I didn't have a problem with his relationship with the Commissioner. The problem is, to come and overly impose himself on me and my colleagues and give us instructions when we colleagues at the same level without the Commissioner clarifying, are we also reporting to him insofar as 1, 2, 3 is concerned?
Sorry, you complained about Mr. Makwakwa telling you must go to Parliament on Tuesday. Did you complain about the fact that he was giving you instructions
Yes.
how to deal with taxpayers?
Actually, if I were to go a step back, after that incident where the Commissioner stormed out of the meeting, after I'd made those utterances, when I spoke to the Commissioner and he asked me about dictatorship, I said specifically to him, I wasn't even referring to you, Commissioner. I'm referring to my colleague, Jonas Makwakwa. And he even said, but you must speak to your colleague. I said, I've tried, but it's not working out. And I got frustrated. Perhaps I shouldn't have said it in front of other people, but you know what? Everybody felt the same way. And when I said those words, when the Commissioner took a break, I got so many hugs from my colleagues.
Why are they hugging you?
They were so happy somebody said what they've been bottling for a long time.
I just want to come back just on the clarification.
Yes.
You raised the issue with the Commissioner around the interference of Mr. Makwakwa. He advised you to speak to Mr. Makwakwa, which you said you had done, but nothing was coming out there. Did he do anything himself thereafter?
You mean the Commissioner?
The Commissioner.
I doubt. I never had that impression.
Well, did this continue after you had raised it,
It
with
did.
with the commissioner?
It did. There was a time, a week or two, where I felt it was a little bit, but it can't be more than 2 weeks. It continued without fail. And I acknowledge, maybe, the way Mr. Makwakwa conducted himself is due to the level of power that he was given or allowed to exercise, because he was very powerful in the organization. We all know that. And we know the commissioner relied on him for so many things.
Yes. Now, let's go back to the meeting where you said to the commissioner, Commissioner, are we reporting to Mr. Makwakwa? And so on. What was his response to that engagement?
He said, speak to your colleague. That was his response.
And that was the end of it. That's what he said. He said, and speak to your colleague.
He said, I must speak to you. And it's after I explained the dictatorship part, because he thought I'm referring to him. I wasn't referring to the commission. I was frustrated by Mr. Makwakwa's, constant, interference and, running us around in a way and giving our people instructions without speaking to us. That's what was happening.
All right. Now, I want to, and you remained at Exco,
Yes.
occupying your portfolio.
Yes.
And did things change at any point?
I have to be very careful about what I say here. Okay. There were very few instances where I felt the commissioner is irritated with me. Okay. Maybe I would have been, after I felt somebody, what's the word in English? They picking a fight or whatever with me. Yeah. Maybe I would have been irritated. But I need to put it on record that Mr. Moyani himself never, ever, even for one day, ill-treated me or spoke to me very badly. Whether we were together or in front of other people, he never displayed that kind of negative behavior. But I could feel that there's something, he used to joke with me in a specific manner. I could see he's a little bit restrained. But he didn't treat me badly, I won't say that. Once or twice, I was rescued by my colleagues in Exco when he started, sort of poking holes on my strategy, that it came late and blah, 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 all those. And one or two colleagues said, no, but Makungu has done a brilliant job here. And he could see that, no. And he said, no. I must acknowledge, in the end, things were fine. Yes. So it's those, but where he shouted me or showed me where I felt hatred from him as my boss, no. And I have to be fair to him. Most of the time, he would even give me guidance, if you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Guidance like a father would guide a daughter, like a boss would guide,
Yes.
their subordinate. He consulted me on a number of issues. I remember when he launched the operating model. The day after he launched the model, he called me into his office. He says, Makungu, I know you're always, honest. I would love to have feedback from you. What do you think went right? Where should I improve and all that? This is after he launched the new operating model.
Did he say this before?
That's the day after.
Yes.
Yes, he launched the operating model. We went to a venue outside. I think it was what's that? St. George's Hotel. So the day after, he called me into his office to ask for feedback. And he said he knew that I would give him honest feedback. I gave him feedback about the meeting, which was mostly positive. I mean, there was nothing so negative. By the way, he even acknowledged the work that I've done. The fact that I came empty from legal with no background in strategy and anti-corruption and whatever I was dealing with. He acknowledged that publicly. So I wouldn't say there was that level of animosity, unless, of course, if one of us was pretentious. I don't know.
Okay. Do you still occupy an acting position in Exco today?
No.
Why?
Phew, it's a tough one.
Sorry, can I just ask, following up, You were on EXCO, and a new operating model was told to you after the event. Just two questions. Did that upset you at all, that EXCO wasn't consulted in advance? And who did determine the new operating model?
Okay. Maybe that's the part that I left when I talked about the dictatorship and all those things. The whole of EXCO was never involved with the operating model, except for Mr. Makwakwa mostly, and Mr. Matsubani Matlo, who was the Chief Finance Officer. Mr. Matlo and Mr. Makwakwa sat in the Kruon Commission. And Mr. Matlo always complained in EXCO that Mr. Makwakwa, Jonas, is always 2-3 steps ahead of him. He looks like a fool when he gets to the commission because Jonas knows everything, he doesn't know anything, he doesn't share information. So, Matsubani Matlo was only involved at a small scale the way I read it. It was Jonas who determined what happens with the operating model. And even the chief of HR, Mrs. Elizabeth Kumalo, she raised it several times in EXCO that she's so unhappy. So it wasn't a secret. The other person who played an important role, I think, because he was assigned certain duties is Mr. Lebelo, Mr. Luther Lebelo. He had a role there.
But did you ever raise yourself within the EXCO any concerns around the process that was being undertaken in determining the new operating model?
Actually, even if Advocate Vuyo were to raise, Makungu would support. So we all raised, if you hear what I'm saying, we all raised the same concern. Of course, we are different personalities in EXCO. Somebody like Kuosilo would act with restraint and keep quiet and look down. But he had concerns also. I know that for a fact. So we all raised it in so many different ways. But
was there ever a reaction? What came up out of all of those issues that you had raised around the determination of the new operating model?
Nothing changed.
But was there ever anything said, say, by the commissioner? If you raised it at the EXCO, was there ever any reaction that you're saying we're being left behind, we're not participating in this? Was there ever any reaction to that?
Not necessarily, but we understood it to be sort of a confidential process that will be unfolded at a later stage.
Did you understand it from what he said, or you just simply came to your own deductions?
I came to my own conclusion.
Sorry, just one more question, if you don't mind, Council, on this. Did you think that new operating model remedied anything that was wrong?
Sure. Perhaps I'll be too subjective because the new operating model ended up affecting me negatively. It would be very difficult for me to see anything good. I wouldn't be that objective. But I think there are one or two things that could have been improved upon perhaps. But I never got to a stage where I felt SARS was dysfunctional to the point that it needs a complete overhaul, if you hear what I'm saying. I never had that impression. Sure.
Yes. Let's go into the reasons why you no longer occupy a position in EXCO.
Sure.
What transpired?
Okay. Some of the reasons I will know, some I won't know. But the main reason, okay, let me try and put this properly. So I acted for 11 months. Around September, on the 10th of September, actually, 2015, I went for an interview where Mr. Moyane had invited me to apply for any position that I wanted at EXCO level. He gave me a letter and he had a one-on-one with me prior to the process. And I indicated that, no, I like the position that I'm acting in, you know. It gives me a whole view to the organization. I understand, you know, the synergy between divisions, you know, the interdependencies, how we could improve things. And I loved, preparing him for Parliament. It was an exciting role. I loved it. I loved the things we were dealing with, the stakeholders, your, what do you call it, the RCBs that we were dealing with, all those things. So he said, I remember his words when he said, which position are you interested in? And I told him, he said, no problem. You can see I'm noting that, but please be mindful that I'm going to consider you amongst others who have also shown an interest in it. And I thought that was good and fair. Went to the interview. Okay. An interview is an interview. Some things went well, some didn't. It's not an issue. I was told I'll have feedback by the 30th of September. And true to his word, I got feedback, but I got it from a very junior employee. And I burst into tears. I couldn't help it because I thought my boss would call me in and say, the panel decided not to go for you. Fine. He never promised me any position. And I was just, acting, and I was still learning so much. And I had to exercise that kind of maturity to say, I've learned this, I can continue and learn. One day I'll be at this level, no problem. But the way it was handled, it disheartened me a lot.
What were the reasons? Do you remember the reasons that you were given by the very junior employee?
Elise was the one who was very close to Jonas. I take it because Jonas was running the operating model. Maybe, this is not a fact. It's just how I deduce this thing to have taken place. Perhaps Jonas asked Elise to convey the message to me.
No, I'm asking about the substantive reasons. So the employee came to you and said you were not appointed because of XYZ. What was it?
She said the panel decided not to go for you. She didn't go further.
Okay.
Okay. Immediately I was told I must apply for a GE position. I had a GE position that was still as is, hadn't changed in any manner or form, and the qualifications were exactly my qualifications, the qualifications that were required. My understanding was that everyone at group executive level needs to reapply for their positions. And like the good employee, compliant employee that I am, I did reapply for my position. And I applied for one more position in the strategy division that I was looking after. I was still acting at that stage, by the way. I applied for partnership development and something. Partnership development and stakeholders, something, yeah. Those were the only two positions I applied for. Went for an interview. In my view, it went very well for that matter. I can't say I aced it because you get out of an interview, you feel maybe I could have done this. And the previous interview for the chief officer position had prepared me for this one. Actually, I ended up feeling like the GE position was a little bit tougher than the chief officer position because they asked so many questions. So the other chief officer position, well, I was panicking like anybody else, and I could have, in the beginning talked a lot of nonsense, but the commissioner himself made me relax. I remember when I got home, when my husband asked me how it went, I said, perhaps if the commissioner were to look at the interview alone, somebody could have performed better than I did. But if you were to look at the overall picture, because he's always grateful for all my efforts in the division and is happy with my work, maybe, but I couldn't say for sure. And when I didn't get appointed, of course I was disappointed, but I wasn't banking on being appointed as a chief officer. And immediately I aligned my mind to going back to my old position. That's why I reapplied for it.
Yes.
Yes.
May I just clarify? Can I just
Yes, Judge.
clarify? The position you applied for, was that the position you had occupied before you went into the acting position?
Yes,
Exactly
Judge.
the same position?
This is the same position.
You weren't appointed to it?
No.
And And similarly, were you given any reasons why you weren't reappointed? Nothing had changed in the position, so what was the reason that was advanced for that?
Okay. When we were given feedback, those of us who were not appointed, we were called in one by one. And I remember the strangest thing was that Mr. Makoko was inside the room and he didn't interview me. The other people were there who had interviewed me, except for one of the ladies who was invited from external. And I was too shocked to ask what went wrong. I just asked them, so what do you want me to do? Where am I going? Mr. Makoko answered, he said, we'll find something, of course he will find something for you to do. That was his response.
Yes.
And Mr. Matlo was also saying things, I'll go and talk to Kosi, we'll talk to him, in that, it wasn't a nice manner.
Yes.
Especially if you're dealing with people who are supposed to be, they didn't make it. They're still part of you. They're still part of the organization. When we say we're a caring organization, how do we treat people like that? And I don't want to say much, but I could read the expressions. I could see, something in how this was conveyed to me. I later on asked for reasons. I needed reasons. And Mr. Matloa, who was the lead interviewer for our positions, because others it was Mr. Makoko. He struggled to explain in that meeting. There was a junior employee who I'm not going to mention by name because he's still in the organization. And there was another lady who conducted interviews on the Jonah side, because I think they mixed people, those that were interviewed this side and that side. There was Mr. Sidney Mutsepe who was sitting in my interview. I think he was a consultant, recruitment consultant or something, and Mr. Matlo. The meeting didn't start on a good note because I objected to the presence of a junior employee who was still going to go through the process that I just went through, because it puts them at an advantage and all that. And I just thought it's unethical in a way.
Yes.
But nevertheless, Mr. Matlo decided, no, it's going to go ahead like that. They all struggled to give me reasons. The only thing that I was told is that, Mr. Matlo said, you acted as if everybody knows the achievements that you have at SARS, and you're not the right person to take SARS forward, to take corporate legal services forward. I asked in what way. They couldn't explain. So he said, just apply for other positions. By the way, I was given a letter that says you were not successful for the positions that you had applied for. It didn't even have the names of the positions, only to say, please continue and apply for other positions. Yeah.
And did you apply for any other positions?
Definitely.
Yes.
To show that I was still interested in my position, because they said any other position. They didn't say you can't apply for what you'd applied for before. I went back and reapplied for the corporate legal services group executive position.
No one had been appointed to that position?
No. By the way, I'm sorry. Let me just go one step back. I was told, by the way, you're the only person who applied for your own position. They put it that way. You were the only person, so no other person. There are legal people in legal who could have applied, but they, without any form of solicitation of that information, it was offered to me.
In other words, you're the only GE,
yes,
right, General Executive or Group Executive, Group Executive who had reapplied for their position and was not appointed. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
So that's what I was told.
Okay. So, all right. Continue.
I reapplied for the corporate legal services GE position. I said, maybe, you try and convince yourself that perhaps they think you should, look at other positions. Don't get stuck in this, I'm group executive legal, because we've always been encouraged to be versatile and be able to deal with whatever challenge that comes to us at that level. So I applied for group executive procurement and group executive governance and risk, as well as the group executive corporate legal, 3 of those. I never got any response whatsoever, except for one of the positions. I got a response from Mr. Mthebule for the governance one. And I remember I'd read something like this: after careful consideration, we have decided not to shortlist you. That was the only response I received.
Council, can I just intervene one thing? While all of this was going on, what were you doing?
Mostly reading newspapers and reading books that Mr. Lowe had given me.
And what were you being paid for reading newspapers?
My salary is a public thing that's been there it's over 2.5 million.
While you were reading newspapers?
Yes, I think by that time it was still about 2.3 or so. So I was shame. Mr. Lowe was at pains to keep me busy because his heart was breaking. By the way, he wasn't part of the panel that interviewed for his own division. For what? No, why he wasn't around, I don't know. Yes. So he gave me a few things to do, but he was cautious because he even said some of your colleagues say they don't want you, especially in management meetings and whatever, they feel uncomfortable because you're no longer in management. So what I'm trying to explain is that our colleagues also had fear. I don't know what they were told, but it looks like people were uncomfortable around those that were sidelined or those that were unsuccessful in their positions.
Yes.
So mostly he asked me to look after the monitoring, evaluation, reporting, the things that I would normally deal with, when I was still acting in the other position.
Yes. So, and what subsequently became of you? So you are rejected in every position that you've applied for,
Yes.
both at EXCO level and also at group executive level. What becomes of you at SARS thereafter?
Nothing.
Nothing. And you
Nothing.
continue to earn a salary
Yes.
at the same level of a group executive?
Actually, I earned more
Okay.
afterwards. To go one step back, when I didn't make it, according to Mr. Makoko and Matlo, as group executive, after their meeting, the commissioner called me. Maybe 30 minutes after that, and he said he understands that I couldn't retain even my own position, and he doesn't know how I'm going to continue acting as a chief officer. So I was removed from both positions on one day, and people were put to act in those positions, and they were announced in the organization. It was sort of humiliating. I think, in my view, it was the intention to humiliate and cast doubt on your level of professionalism, your knowledge and skills, your integrity and all that. So it happened in one day. So I woke up the next day without a job virtually. And it continued like that for 15 months. I was doing odd jobs. I was even disinvited from meetings. In my position, even as legal, I used to occupy, certain roles where I would sit in governance committees because you need a legal person to advise on specific things. I was told not to come to any meetings, not even our management meeting. So that's what happened for those months, up until we got bonuses.
Yes. What happened there? Did you receive a bonus?
Yes, I did. The biggest I've ever seen.
Tell us about it.
Okay. Okay. I was fired from 2 positions the previous year by the commissioner. I would say by the commissioner in both, because he's the one who decides who's group executive and who's not. He signs off. So, August, around the 18th of August, the commissioner called me into his office. By the way, when he saw me, we still hugged and all that, and, you know, yeah. When he called me into his office, I had prepared myself to be told, you have failed drastically. You are not going to get a bonus. I had already, you know, aligned my mind to that. And I got a pleasant surprise when he held the envelope and said, this is yours and you deserve it, not a favor. If I show you the letter, it will say, you know, it talks about my high level of performance, the good work and contribution that I'm doing to the organization. Just to put into context, I used to receive plus minus 18% of my total package, you know, as bonus. You know, the maximum that people at my level could get, I think it's 35 or 37.5, somewhere there. And the previous year, when I was still acting as a chief, I had gotten about 24%, which was also good. I was encouraged. That's why I worked harder. But after I got removed, I got 30% of my total package.
Sorry, so that enhanced bonus was for a period that
when
you did nothing?
Yes, mostly.
But what did the letter say the bonus was for?
Due to your high level of performance, something like that. And thanking me for the contribution that I continue to make to SARS and will still continue to make to SARS.
Okay. While doing nothing? Okay.
While doing nothing.
And what happens, you say, for a period of 15 months, you're in limbo?
Yes.
What happens thereafter? So 15-month period, does something happen?
Yes.
What happens?
Can I just go one step back?
Okay.
Before we get there. In August, I got a bonus. Normally in SARS, we receive annual increases around July. I had received a good annual increase, like any other person at my level. But in September, the commissioner gave me an ad hoc increase, which is normally given to people who perform well. And sometimes it's to sort of align salaries and whatever, if you find people at the same level, you know. But it depends on performance also. I received a good ad hoc increase also. So in addition to the bonus, when I wasn't working and I wasn't doing anything much, I got an ad hoc increase.
And was this the largest ad hoc increase you've ever had? What was the percentage?
I think it was about 3.4, 3.8. But on my salary, it was good money.
Yes.
It gave me an additional net of about 5,000 or so.
Yes.
It was not so bad, you know.
Council, can I ask you, why did you think you got such wonderful bonuses and payments? Did it cross your mind that this was extraordinary?
Yes, for me it was very extraordinary.
And how did you rationalize it?
I can only speculate, Prof. I think either the commissioner was regretful of the decisions that he had made, or it was a way of, you know, sort of shutting me up a bit so that I don't make noise. Because I decided to handle this matter differently. I didn't go to CCMA, I didn't do all those things. So I don't know, I can only speculate. I'm sure if you interview Mr. Moyan, he'll be in a position to better explain.
Ms.
Yes.
Mthebule, sorry. We understand that with the new operating model, there were lots of changes which were made, including in positions, you know. Were all the group executives, there were no changes in the position that you occupied as a group executive?
There was no change.
Were all the group executives supposed to apply for either their own positions or for different positions?
All the group executives were required to to apply. It was a must. Reapply for their positions in whatever manner or form. And they were allowed to apply for any other position.
Okay.
That's why I applied for 2. The one being from within the division in which I was acting as a chief. So, and if I remember, it's only 2 or 3 positions in the whole structure that hadn't changed at all. But I'm sure of mine and another one. The third one, I'm not so sure.
Now as a lawyer and previously and being the GE for corporate legal services, did you ever question the correctness of that in law?
I don't know how many times I questioned it. I did, and I must say I wanted to burden Mr. Lowe as the chief legal officer to make sure that he fixes it. That though he wasn't part of the interview, but we had numerous discussions where he ended up saying to me, Makungu, I had nothing to do with this, and I'm so sorry to mention Gosi's name in this way. He was a good boss. He said, please talk to Jonas. So that's a loaded statement. Insofar as my position is concerned, he said, please talk to Jonas. Go and ask him. The one day he seemed so frustrated, he said, maybe you should ask him and the commissioner whether you still have a place in this organization.
I'm just putting aside your own role, but I'm looking at it from the implementation of the operating model. At the point where it was said, everybody will apply for their jobs which have not changed, as was the case with yours. Was there ever an issue raised at EXCO that process is not appropriate?
No. Let me try and explain. At EXCO, we understood that there are different processes for the different levels. That's what we were told. There's a different process for chief officers, and truly it was like that. You were invited to apply. There were no adverts for the positions. You were invited by the commissioner specifically. Then it came to group executive level, where they gave us a number of positions that we could look at. Virtually the new positions in the operating model, including mine, which was not a new position as such. So what was being said is that everybody needs to apply. If we go down one step further, they started talking of affected and not affected employees. So me being the employee that I am, wanting to do the right thing and not wanting to raise things, though I saw that this position hasn't changed, I told myself, let me comply with the processes. Let me not raise, because I thought, okay, it's automatic, I'm going to go back to my position. I never for 1 minute thought or dreamt that I'd be told, no, you're not the one to take corporate legal forward.
And the chief officer for HR, did he or she raise anything about that?
She raised so many things. That time it was Mrs. Elizabeth Khumalo. She was in tears at some stage. She was always frustrated in EXCO. She was always raising this issue. Why am I not a part of this? She wasn't involved in the operating model. It was her subordinate, Mr. Ludalibilo, who was involved mainly from the HR side, and other people who were given specific roles in certain projects relating to the operating model.
So what were the responses to those questions?
Excuse me?
What were the responses to the questions that had been raised around this process? If it had been raised within EXCO that was an inappropriate process, what was the response to that?
Always the same. We will let you know when the time comes.
Sorry, who was driving all of this?
It was Jonas Makoko. It was announced. It wasn't a secret. It was announced throughout the organization that I can't remember whether it was the project leader or the process owner or what, but it was very clear to everybody. It wasn't even done secretly. We all knew it was Jonas.
I've been told that he was the head of what was called the steering committee that drove the processes.
It's possible. I can't even remember. The steering committee that I remember was the one that dealt with the process after people were displaced from their positions. That was the steering committee that I remember. But I remember at that stage I was a little bit lost in the organization. I wasn't sure of what's happening exactly.
What happens? You're still telling us what happens after 15 months.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sure people would be thinking, this lady, you know, she's so well qualified. Why is she staying here, you know? And I decided I'm going to stay till they fix my issue. I'm a lawyer, as you said, Advocate Katla. I know my rights. I told myself I don't want to say fight it, but it's fighting. So, somewhere from end of 2016, there were various engagements. Between me and my manager then, Mr. Lowe. Mr. Lowe was very uncomfortable. He's a good person. It put him in a very difficult position. Moreover, he wasn't part of the process to select the people he wanted in his division. Nevertheless, we reached a stage where I said, I'm not going to sign anything. I was being pushed to be a specialist, what they call principal specialist. And I asked him, what am I going to specialize in? You recruited me specifically to come and manage a division. And what do I specialize in? So you're not supposed to have direct reports to you. You're not supposed to have a PA and all those. And the way I read it is, it was a way of saying your time has expired at SARS. Please go. But I wasn't going to go up until this was resolved. Mr. Mokoena came to SARS, Tebogo Mokoena, then the new HR chief, who came after Mrs. Elizabeth Kumalo resigned. Mr. Mokoena, from the beginning, when he interacted with me and Mr. Lowe, he showed confusion and shock, on his face as to what's happening here. And he wanted to fix it. Before we got to that, I had responded to a letter that Mr. Lowe had written to me saying, now you have to sign or you're out of the organization. I told them why I can't be out without going into detail. The one question I wanted answered was, why am I being even denied the opportunity to go for other interviews? Mind you, my position was filled already. When I applied for the second time, other people applied as well because the process was open to all SARS employees as well as external people. One of my subordinates applied. His name is Eric Smith. I'll mention him. He's still in the organization. He applied and he was given the position. But when he applied, he's the only one who was shortlisted amongst others who had applied, other highly qualified people. Eric and I have a very good relationship, open relationship. We'd worked together all these years. And the whole process stressed him, I must put on record. And I couldn't understand what was happening, even though I could see where it's going. So I said to Kuosi in our subsequent discussions, I want my position back, or you give me an equal position with the equal value. I'm still going to stay here at SARS. And there were those negotiations or discussions between him and Mr. Mokoena and the commissioner. Somehow, eventually, I was reinstated to my position on 5 May 2017. Though I was asked to hold it a little bit till they finalized their negotiations with Eric, because he asked to be taken back to his old position of executive. He was executive, reporting to me as group executive. And the one thing that I didn't understand, I know, sometimes let's say I was still lacking. I'm still young. Eric is 17 years older than me. He was already 62. I was 44 at that stage. At this day and era of a democratic South Africa, you take a white male who's at pensionable age and you remove a black woman who's highly qualified. I don't understand that. And I would never understand it. And for me, there were ulterior motives. I couldn't get answers when I asked.
What do you think led to your demise in the particular way that it had? Things unfolded.
Maybe my big mouth. I don't believe in keeping things, you know. If I see there's something that could be fixed, I will say it. Perhaps as we grow, we realize that this kind of an issue, raise it separately. This one, you can raise it in an open forum. I thought EXCO is a forum where one could raise organizational issues that affect us all. That's why I raised the things that I told you I raised. But I think it was that, but that's my view. The other thing, I'm an African woman who's quite highly qualified. And I consider myself competent. I'm not saying I know it all, but wherever I've worked, I've been promoted. I've done well for myself. Perhaps, I don't know, the commissioner would go on retirement at some stage. He was already in his 60s. Who knows? Maybe we were still starting to look at the commissioner's position or a possible deputy commissioner position. I don't know.
And who do you think was behind this?
It's a tough one. I don't know. The truth of the matter is that there were people who were sort of seen as the possible successors to the commissioner. And perhaps one or two of them.
Yes. And my very last question to you is, initially you'd given evidence about the philosophy of the higher purpose. How did the organization go from that philosophy to the culture of fear that you've just given evidence about?
Sure. I won't even say it was a long road. It was quite quick. When Mr. Pillay got suspended, he was the acting commissioner. I'm not saying things were perfect. There was an element of fear. There was. Maybe there was always an element of fear anyway. People are scared of leadership for various reasons. I never felt my job is at stake. Never. I never felt I'm unwanted. No. Things changed quickly when Mr. Moyane came in. Even though it didn't affect me immediately, I could see what's happening to people. I told you about people approaching me for this and that. And it's because of, when people use their power in a negative manner. You're powerful, you rule the organization and you can instruct anybody to do anything. I think that's where things got wrong. And sorry, as I said before, I feel one of our colleagues was just given too much power. And perhaps he didn't use that power.
Who's that colleague?
It's Mr. Makwakwa, as I said. Perhaps he didn't use that power positively. Perhaps in hindsight, I hope, because I don't want to dwell on negativity all the time. I hope this process will help us move forward and help us heal, because this is painful. And I will carry it forever. It's humiliating. Just put yourself in my position for 1 minute. You're being fired from 2 positions in one day, so that the whole world can, start doubting your capability, your integrity. Because obviously people will start asking themselves, what's so wrong with her? So I hope the organization will move forward. And I will be so happy if recommendations could come out that could help us move forward You know, I'm not looking at paying revenge or whatever. And all the information I'm giving, it's not because I want to put people down. I have to tell the truth as it happened to me.
Well, thank you very much for your evidence. Judge, that is the conclusion of my questions.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure it's been painful for you, but it's been very informative for us.
Thank you, Judge. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Sear, what is the position now?
The witness that follows, Judge, is Mr. Bernard Mofokeng.
Yes. Is he present?
I saw him earlier. Yes, he is, Judge.
Well, shall we get on with that?
Yes, Judge. Mr. Mofokeng.
Yes, Mr. Sear, we're running a bit behind time, but I think it was worthwhile doing so to hear some of the evidence we have heard this morning.
Indeed, Judge.
Shall we get on to the next witness?
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Just 1 minute. Thank you very much for coming. Do you affirm that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, will you say, I do?
I do.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm sure at this point you're aware of the purpose of this hearing, so I won't belabor that point. I want us to go straight into your qualifications.
I've got the B.Juris LLB, LLM, and also Chartered Secretaries membership.
And when did you join SARS? And
Also HD Tech, sorry.
Apologies. And when did you join SARS and in what capacity?
I worked for SARS initially in 2003 as a legal advisor. For about 3 years, reported to Makungu. I left SARS and came back in 2009, October, as a senior manager for the tax court.
And why did you join SARS? So initially, what prompted you to join SARS when you did in 2003?
I was interested in working with tax, hence I wanted to work for SARS. I think that was my main reason initially.
Yes. And what was it like working for SARS at that point?
No, it was interesting. I learned a lot. I did lots of interesting stuff, and I wanted to continue doing tax work. Hence, I continued working for SARS for such a while.
Yes. And did SARS have a philosophy at the time?
I think at the time is where I was. Our aim was to make things easier for the taxpayer.
Yes.
So that was what we were aiming for at the time. Simply that.
Yes. And during your time at SARS, did you receive any promotions?
My initial stint or the second one?
The second stint in particular.
Okay. I started as senior manager in the tax court. A year later, when my immediate manager resigned, I was appointed to act as the group executive for dispute resolution. And during that time, I was promoted to an executive and later to a group executive.
Yes.
That's the time between 2010 and 2016.
And what were your general responsibilities in the respective roles that you occupied?
Let me explain dispute resolution first. It might make things easier to understand what was my role.
Yes.
Dispute resolution consisted of ADR unit, the tax court litigation unit, high court litigation unit, customs and excise litigation unit, high court litigation unit, office of the registrar of the tax court. Those were the main units of dispute resolution. So the purpose of this dispute resolution is to resolve all tax and customs disputes against SARS. So any court case in the lower courts, higher courts, Supreme Court, Constitutional Court were handled through dispute resolution. And also the administration of the tax courts around the country was also handled within dispute resolution. In terms of organizing the tax court role, communicating with the judge presidents, and also making the hearings in the tax court happen on time and perfectly, that was the role of dispute resolution.
Yes. And the working atmosphere, how did you find it after you came back again?
The atmosphere was great. I enjoyed it, and I felt like people could voice their concerns, and because we're working with lawyers, people need to be free to express what they feel, their arguments, so that, because in cases there are different arguments, and in tax there's different way of interpreting the law. As a manager or as a leader, you cannot tell them how they should litigate a case. So normally we'll listen to anybody's opinion and argue, then take the best case forward or the best argument forward.
Yes.
So for that type of area, you need to motivate people to express themselves and think independently so that the division itself can be successful. Without independent thinking, I don't think you'll succeed in that area.
Yes. And did things change for you at any point?
Basically, when the operating model started, I think that's when things started to change.
And what was so contentious about the operational model?
Operating model, first of all, looking at the operating model, I didn't understand their logic, why they changed dispute resolution the way they did, or the way they changed legal the way they did. Because some of the way it was structured, they understood it according to best international, best practice, in that certain areas must be independent from certain areas so that independent decision-making can take place. But once you combine certain areas, you lose that kind of independence. For example, people who sit on the objection stage should not be involved in the appeal stage. But once you combine them, certain people within legal are already involved at the objection stage. Then you put them into the same area where they report to the same person who's also dealing with appeals. That already blurs the line of independence as well. And with legal advice in different divisions and also sitting on doing certain governance issues, they need to be independent, and they shouldn't be concerned that in that area, in that unit, we decided like this. Now in this area, we can't decide differently from that, what decided in the other unit, because we are putting to the same person. So what I'm trying to emphasize that you need to have that separation to ensure some sort of independence.
And as a group executive, were you ever consulted in the process?
No, I was not consulted.
At all?
I was asked some questions, but
By
I was
who?
not. By one of the guys from Bain asked me a question about dispute resolution, that's all.
What was the question? Do you recall?
I don't even recall what was the question about. It was not significant.
And you never raised these objections with anybody, for instance, your line chief officer or whatever the case may be, relating to the review?
Initially, when they started with the operating model, they had what they called, I think it flowed from what we used to have as GEs called the GEs forum. When they introduced the operating model, they called us GEs to this room to tell us about the operating model so that we can voice our concerns and what do we think if we've got any issues, because they still need to engage in GEs first. So there was one meeting called on that to discuss the operating model. It was called by Jonas and Ronald, I think. Jonas and Ronald, they were the main people who were there. So in that meeting, that's when we started to express our concern about the operating model, that we were not consulted I remember Jonas said to Tinas that he actually consulted Tinas. Tinas said, no, I was not consulted. I was asked a question, but that's not consultation in my book. Then they asked, did anybody around here in this room, was anybody else consulted? We all said, no, nobody was consulted on the operating model. So none of us were consulted, basically. And that forum, the way I understood it, was supposed to help us comment, raise our concern on the operating model. And if it continued, I would have raised my concern. And some of the concerns that I had was that the people who are running it are conflicted. Jonas was conflicted, Ronald was conflicted, Luther was conflicted. They're also going to be interviewed, also going to go through the process, but they were running it. So already that was already a big problem for me. They should have been somewhat independent. So Jonas cancelled that meeting and well that meeting. Subsequent meetings were called, but I think we insisted that the commissioner must be there in those meetings because some of us felt that Jonas was not the right person for us to talk to on the operating model. The commissioner is the right person. And they were subsequently cancelled because people did not want to attend those meetings. So those meetings never took place.
They didn't want to attend them because the commissioner wasn't going to attend.
Yes. Because I think at some point, or somebody else from Micha wanted to attend, said, no, we can't, you need the commissioner there. So they never happened again, those meetings.
I just want to...
Can I just ask, did the commissioner decline to attend?
I don't know whether he declined or not, whether he was invited or not, but we wanted him there, but he was not there.
But you were told he wouldn't be attending?
Yes.
Sorry.
And there were never any further meetings on the operating model at which the commissioner was present, addressing yourselves as the group executives?
No, none at all, unless I was absent in one of them, but as a commissioner never came to address GEs.
Can you just help me to understand? Mr. Makwakwa had risen from, I'm not quite sure what position, he was chief of operations. Is that right?
Yes.
What did operations have to do with all of this restructuring taking place and dealing with other people's positions? That's not an operations function, is it?
I don't know what he had to do with it.
But I mean, is that an operations, what you'd expect the operations chief to be doing?
Not at all. I would expect the HR person to be involved there, but not him.
I just want to hone in on what you said, that the people who were tasked with the responsibility of steering the process were conflicted. What do you mean in particular that they were conflicted? You said they would have to reapply. Please elaborate on that. What do you mean?
I think some of the previous witnesses alluded to it. Jonas was a GE. I was also a GE, and some of the people who testified also GEs as well. So he was also affected as well. He has to apply for his old post back. And also he has to apply for a position as a chief officer. So did Ronald had to apply, so did Luther had to apply for any position that they wanted there. And they were running the process. So they would have known the internal process, what is required, who's going to interview who. They would have interacted with the interviewers, the panel that interviewed all the people. From that already, they had an unfair advantage over anyone else.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Did Mr. Makwakwa have to apply for his position again?
Yeah, he had to apply.
Did he get it?
No, he got the one for the chief officer, that's what I understand.
Sorry, a few other witnesses have spoken about Ronald. Who was Ronald and what was his position?
Ronald Magomba was executive for, I think, I'm not sure where, but I think it was in audit or something.
Okay.
I'm not sure what executive for what.
Just one more thing, if you don't mind. I understand that at one point the commissioner took upon himself the HR role as well. Is that, do you remember that?
So, Judge,
may be incorrect, but I recall being told that the commissioner allocated to himself the human relations role. Do
I
you
don't
remember?
recall that, Judge. I don't
Recall that.
Yes, and so was there ever a response to the objection that the group executives had lodged, relating in particular to the conflicted manner that the people were tasked with the responsibility of steering were conducting themselves in?
Can you ask the question again?
Okay. Did they respond? Did the steering committee respond to your objection? You said they were conflicted.
What I'm
They
saying is that
respond to that.
that's what we told them, but there was never any meeting where we could tell them anything. There was only one meeting that was cancelled in the middle. Then after that, we never had any interaction with that group as group executives ever again.
And there was no further engagement on the operational model thereafter.
With GEs, no.
Sorry, Council, can I just ask, if you don't mind, we've heard from other witnesses about their reaction to the impact of the new operational model. But in the context of dispute resolution, which was your response, was there anything wrong with the way dispute resolution operated prior to the new model? Was there a necessity for a new model?
Personally, I don't think so, because Mr. Low did not have any problem with dispute resolution. Actually, according to me, he was happy, unless he can indicate otherwise. And he told us so, the unit itself. He told us that it was performing well, no crisis, cases were going well, everything was well.
And was the new model adverse to the operations of dispute resolution?
To a certain extent, it is.
When you spoke to Bain, did Bain ever set out to you what was the problem with the way dispute resolution had been structured, which necessitated the change? Did they give you a sense of this is the case for change?
No. I don't think we ever discussed it to that extent.
And I want us to go to an incident that occurred in your division. It must have occurred around 2014 or 2015 regarding the employment of someone new. Could you please elaborate on what occurred?
I think you're talking about the employment of Ms. Kelly Ann Elsky.
Yes.
The whole incident started when my senior manager at the time, Diane Lalo, came to me and told me that she was just offered a person to join her unit. Her unit was the High Court Litigation Unit.
And who offered the person?
Jonas Magogo was offered her the position, the person. So she asked me if I was willing to let the person come to dispute the resolution. I said it's fine as long as the person is coming with the post and budget and she's got the right skills for the position. I'm happy with it. It's up to you. Then she said, no, it's fine. She'll go back and find out more. Then apparently she went back to Jonas. Jonas said, come, the position will come with post and budget. I said, if that's the case, it's fine, proceed. You can come to our
And
unit.
what's a post-end budget?
Post-end budget means that the person comes with their post from wherever division they come from, and we don't have to pay that person. They come with a budget for that position as well.
Yes. Yes, please continue.
So Diane proceeded with the transfer. They signed all the documents for the transfer of her to join dispute. And eventually it was around, it started in 2014, late 2014, around November, the process in 2014. And all the documents were done and she was transferred, I think, end of January 2015 to a position of a junior legal assistant, I think, in the High Court Litigation Unit.
Yes.
So that was that. I think what happened after was a little bit strange.
Sorry, Mr. Mofokeng, can I interrupt? Is this the normal process that you would follow in your division when you hired staff, that they could just be transferred without any interview having been held with the responsible manager for the position to which they were being, or they would be hired?
It's normal. It's not that strange if the person is within SARS.
Okay.
Because you can just transfer to division as long as you've got the right skills, the qualifications to go to that area. And the people who are accepting you are happy with your qualifications and your skills. Then you can get transferred there.
So just looking at the CV without sitting down with the person to interview them?
Probably you have to talk
That's
to the
enough.
person.
Okay.
I did not talk to her. I assumed Diane did everything.
Okay.
I was just the last approver on the thing.
Okay.
But did the person have the qualifications?
That came up later that she does not have a qualification, because in the transfer form, when we transferred her, it said that she had a BA law, and she was studying for an LLB. But subsequently, it transpired that actually doesn't have a BA law. And with her LLB, she's somewhere in the first or second year, maybe first year of LLB. So didn't have the qualifications. So it seems that the transfer was based on incorrect information.
So had there not been that misrepresentation, the transfer would not have been accepted?
Definitely not have been accepted, because with that kind of, if she doesn't have those skills, definitely she won't be able to assist them in the High Court litigation, because it's a very specialized unit.
Yes. Now please continue with the, as you were narrating the story.
Yeah. So I think I jumped to the qualifications, but that came up later. So when she joined Diane's area, within a month there were issues, HR issues between her and some of the team members of the High Court litigation unit. I didn't get to know about it. Diane and the HR person, I think it was Vusi Khumalo, they handled those issues until there was another incident where things flared up in one of the meetings and questions were asked about who's your husband, all these things. And unfortunately for me, fortunately for me, the dispute resolution area had lots of women. So sometimes I prefer not to get involved.
Sorry, had lots of?
Women.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're heavily empowered in that area. So sometimes I preferred not to get involved immediately, because at the end of the day, if they escalate, they'll come to me. So I like to stay away from issues until, per the policy, the matter escalated to me. So when it was eventually escalated to me, I found out that there were issues relating to people saying that persons are involved in extramarital affairs, all those issues, and the grievances were lodged.
Who lodged a grievance against whom?
Miss Kelly Ann Elski lodged a grievance against her manager Diane
Yes.
for alleging that she was involved in an extramarital affair.
All right.
So eventually came to me, then I tried to mediate before we went to the hearing itself. Myself first and Mr. Khumalo, we met with them separately to try to resolve the issue. Unfortunately, in the middle of it all, they said that, no, I'm conflicted, I cannot chair the hearing anymore. So I recused myself, and they appointed an independent mediator from an independent company. I think it was Tokiso. So they appointed them to handle the matter. In that hearing, it transpired that she actually does not have those qualifications. She admitted to it that she doesn't have the qualifications. But at the hearing, they settled, and part of the settlement for that hearing was that she wants to be transferred from the High Court litigation unit to the ADR unit. And that Diane must apologize. That was the end of that hearing.
What to apologize for?
Saying all the things that she said about her.
Yes. Which were all true. I just want to understand.
I'm hesitant to say they were all true or not true.
Okay.
It depends what you're looking for. If you're looking at...
Let me put it to you this way. Did she have the requisite qualification?
No, she did not have. No.
Is that not what Diane had raised in a particular meeting?
She raised that, yes.
She raised that.
And she confirmed, she admitted that she doesn't have those qualifications.
Yes. So I want to understand. So what was said is that Diane must in fact apologize for saying to Kellyanne Elsky that she doesn't have qualifications, which is in fact true.
I think it was also not for that. It was also for the fact that she said that she was involved in the extramarital affair.
Was that untrue?
That's why I'm saying that. Can I just explain why is it a bit of a problem for me to answer that one? Because
What was its relevance to this, the extramarital affair? Did it have anything to do with the work at SARS?
Not really.
Okay.
I didn't see it. Not really. But it was the basis of the grievance hearing. That was the whole basis of the...
Yes, all right. And thereafter, she makes a request, or request is made for Ms. Elsky to be moved from one division to another. What transpired thereafter?
So once they informed me that that was the decision there, I asked ER, specifically, what was it? Mr. Ngwakogapolo and Luther Lebelo, that I find it difficult to do it because he doesn't have the qualifications to join even the ADR unit now. So what should I do? Because now the problem now, we can't move her to a place where she doesn't even have qualifications to join that unit. That was my first dilemma. Then the second dilemma was, now that I know that she doesn't have the qualifications, and the way I get to know it is because it was revealed in the grievance hearing. So I asked ER, can you investigate for me to make sure that indeed she doesn't have those qualifications? Because I don't think I can use what happened in the grievance hearing if I was not there, as a measure for disciplining her that she gave us false information.
And who did you speak to in HR?
It was the senior manager there and the executive. That's why I directed my queries to, besides my own HR person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And was she eventually moved?
They insisted that I must move there, but I resisted for a while, saying that no, she doesn't have the qualification. What will you say to other people in that area that anybody can go there without qualifications? Eventually,
sorry, go ahead.
when I say they, I mean HR.
Yeah.
And what became of Diane?
Diane eventually, during the operating model, she was regarded as an affected person. Her position was eliminated from the structure. And she became an affected person and she had to apply for a position there.
Yes. And during the grievance stage, did she receive threats?
Yes, she received threats from Kelly Ann's mother. She wrote me an email saying that she will do something to Diane because she's messing with her little girl and that she must stop doing that.
Yes.
That she is refraining now because her lawyers told her not to get involved, but she's going to get involved if anything happens to her little girl.
Yes. And what did you do with this email?
The email, I sent it to Mr. Lowe and also to Eric Smith from Corporate Legal.
Yes.
I requested him to address a letter to Mrs. Elsky, informing her that she must refrain from threatening our employees, otherwise we'll take action against her.
Yes.
So that's what we did. And I think Eric also sent that letter to Mrs. Elsky.
Okay. And what happens thereafter? Is there a response to the letter?
I didn't get any response from the letter, but I heard Eric that he was going to discuss with Jonas. I don't know what happened. What discussion was it all about with Jonas about the letter?
Can I ask what happened to You, just leave the others. What happened to you eventually? What was your progression through after this? Are you're still in SARS?
No, I left SARS.
Why did you leave SARS?
Maybe let me go back to the time of the operating model. And during this time, while this whole process of the grievance was happening, the new operating model was being implemented. We were going through interviews. They were showing us the structures. In those structures, our positions, the structure changed. We all had to apply. And in my area, dispute resolution, the only person who was affected by the operating model was Diane Lelo, Kelly Allen's manager. And so she was in dispute resolution. All these units, they've got senior managers in those areas. And Diane was one of the senior managers. Her position was affected as a senior manager there. It was taken out. So her unit did not have a manager anymore. And I found it strange that they took her out because all the other senior managers were there. For me, that was indicative that this was a personal issue with her because there was no point taking that position. I think even the unit now is suffering because of them taking out that position. So on my part, I applied for the dispute resolution position and also the governance and risk. I think that's the one that I applied for. I got interviewed and I was not appointed for any of them. And they gave me feedback that they needed somebody else to take it forward, the area that was dispute resolution. And the new combined unit now. The combined unit was dispute resolution and legal support. Those were the two units combined. So between the two of them, they comprised about 70% of legal now. That unit alone comprised 70% of legal. So they later offered me a position as a principal specialist.
So let's just stop at that point. Everyone's being offered positions as principal specialists.
Yes.
It seems to me that, and I understand principal specialists don't do much work.
True, Judge.
They don't have a reporting line. They don't interact with anyone else. They're just sort of an office out on their own. Is that right? So I just keep hearing this, this principal specialist position.
That was a standard operating process for principal specialists. Mostly the principal specialists were former GEs.
But when they became principal specialists, they don't seem to have done very much.
Yeah, because most of the things that they were doing, half or 60% of the things that they were doing were taken away. Yeah. So normally what I did before even I was appointed as a principal specialist, because it took a long time because we were negotiating with them, it took almost about 10, 11 months before I was appointed as principal specialist, because we had issues. I did not want to sign. I said, why? What is a principal specialist? Give me the job profile. I need to see it and review it. Where was it approved? Was it vetted? Did you went through the whole processes of job profiling? When was it done? Give us the documents. None were forthcoming. And also, when I decided I would sign, I said I want to meet with the commissioner before I sign this thing. Then Mr. Gosulo tried to facilitate a meeting with the commissioner. It didn't happen. I did it myself to arrange a meeting with the commissioner. I sent several meeting requests to the commissioner. None ever was accepted. So I never saw the commissioner until I signed. Eventually, I gave up. I signed this thing in November, December of 2016 as a principal specialist.
At the time of your applying for your old role, what change had happened other than the deletion from the structure of Diane's position?
I don't understand.
I'm saying you were the group executive, and there was your structure of the dispute resolution structure. As I understood you earlier, the only change was that Diane's position was off.
Yes.
Was that at the time when you were invited to apply, that was the only change?
No, what they did for dispute resolution as a subdivision, They only took Diane out of the structure, that position of hers. Then what they did, they combined dispute resolution and regional legal support together as part of legal.
Sorry, was principal specialist a new title post the operational model?
Yes.
Before the operational model, no such position?
It never existed, yeah.
What other, other than being the group executive for dispute resolution, what other responsibilities did you have as a group executive in the organization as a whole? Just briefly.
I sat on different committees, for example, the National Appeals Committee. I was a member of that committee. I also chaired a committee, we used to call it the Section 98 Committee, and also sat on several internal committees within dispute as well for litigation of cases in terms of reviewing pleadings. Also, I sat on the GAR committee, the General Anti-Avoidance Rules Committee. Before we issue a GAR assessment, there's a committee that looks at that assessment and all that. So on that committee. And recently I was also on the Advanced Tax Ruling Committee as well.
So you then took the position of principal specialist, is that right?
Yes.
And just tell us briefly what happened from there until you left the organization.
I continued doing mostly my committee works, the appeal committees, audit committees, also the advising ad hoc on certain matters as well, and also assisted the new chief of legal with her office, also with managing certain cases that she allocates to me. And there was a new structure that was introduced. What was it? Office of the Chief Officer. I also assisted her with that part of the office.
And what made you leave?
I was not fully engaged. I thought my skills are being wasted. For a person like me, having been there for so long, I think my skills have been wasted. And sometimes you see things happening that you could be helping, but you can't help because you have to stay back and let the people who are there try to do it. But you cannot, sometimes don't want to interfere in what people are doing. If they are changing that and that, you think that might not work or they need to do this and that, you can't advise because you are a principal specialist, you're not supposed to get involved.
Okay.
Is there something particular you want to raise, Mr. Sue?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Was there a reduction in your income, in your salary, when you moved to the specialist position?
No.
There wasn't. So you earned the salary of a group executive?
Yes.
During that period. Then the last question that I have for you is, what do you think led to you being moved from the position of the group executive to being a specialist?
What?
Yes.
I think that were the
What do you
reasons.
think?
Were the reasons.
Yes.
Sometimes I think that sometimes I can be vocal, especially in these committees. I think that's why maybe I might have said something or the way I behave there, because in those committees, we used to must speak our mind, interpret the law, and do as best as we can. So that's why I express our view. So I don't know. Speculation on my part. I can't pinpoint it, but also the Kelly Ann incident also definitely affected negatively as well, because she was involved with Jonas, and Jonas was not happy about the treatment that he gave Kelly Ann, and doesn't take much to deduce that Diane and myself were only one affected there, and they were the two most people involved in that dispute with Kelly Ann.
When there was the issue raised in relation to the extramarital affair, did it relate to Jonas and Kelly Ann, or is it totally a different matter?
No, it's related to Jonas and Kelly Ann.
So this was what the issue was?
Yes. It was about Jonathan Kelly and the baby or something like that.
I just have one last question for you. You did not get the job profile of a principal specialist, so basically you are not happy with the position that you are being offered. Why did you sign the letter?
I think because eventually it convinced me that I can mold it the way I want to mold it. And eventually what I did, I said, okay, my appointment letter, it says principal specialist, dispute resolution and anti-avoidance. Because that's what I told him, that if I do this, I'm going to be allocated to doing these two aspects, anti-avoidance work and dispute resolution. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to be running around doing all kinds of things that anybody can think of. That's what I want to concentrate on from now on. Because when I was GE, I couldn't concentrate on certain things that I wanted to do. So now that I'm a specialist now, I'll rather do things that I would like to do, rather concentrate on.
And you left SARS after how many months of having signed the letter and working as a principal specialist?
It was a while, over a year. I think over a year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's
Thank
a
you very
conclusion.
much for coming to inform us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We'll break for half an hour. Sorry.
No, I'm fine. Are you able to move?
Thanks.
Let's talk about